Awesome. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience. My name is Lizzie Meister. I'm the Public Programs Manager here at the museum, and I'm thrilled to get to welcome you all to the museum today to hear about the weight of history, the power of apology, Warren Perrin's new book detailing his experiences as a friend of David Berger and remembering David Berger's legacy. Before we get started, I always have to do this. For our friends on Zoom, I ask that you stay on mute. If you have any questions, please pop your questions in the chat, and I, at the end, will be able to share them with the folks here. Folks in person, I ask to the best of your ability, put your phone on silent. We have bathrooms back through the way you came in. But other than that, I'm just really excited to welcome up Robert Berman, who's going to introduce Warren.
So we are grateful to the Museum of Southern Jewish Experience for this opportunity to hear about Warren Perrin's just published book, The Weight of History, the Power of Apology, Remembering David Berger, 50 years after the Munich Olympics. Today, as I understand, is David Berger's birthday. Would have been 79. So this is a very special occasion. My name is Robert Berman. I'm a philosophy professor at Xavier University, and I'm standing in tonight for my wife, Warren Berger, also a professor. She's at Tulane, professor of philosophy and Jewish studies. She was looking forward very much to this gathering and is so disappointed. She became ill today and couldn't make it. We have both had great appreciation for Warren's book and everything he's doing to keep alive the memory of David Berger's sad and important story. Rana comes to this with a personal connection. She grew up just a few minutes from the Berger family in Shaker Heights, Ohio. They went to the same high school and synagogue. She's a friend of his younger brother, Fred. I actually met Fred myself on one occasion. And she, along with everyone else at the time, shared the shock of the whole community when the news came in 1972 of the terrorist attack in Munich on the Israeli Olympic team, which cut short David Berger's promising life. Warren Perrin became close friends with David as classmates and fellow weightlifters at Tulane in the 1960s, where the two young men came to enjoy and admire one another. Warren learned from their different backgrounds, urban Jewish and Acadian, while discovering their common ground. Both went on to study law. After Columbia Law, David ended up continuing his complete devotion to weightlifting, culminating with his participation as a member of the Israeli Olympic team. Warren wonders if David had lived longer, where his path would have taken him. Warren's path has led him to his position as a skills professor at Loyola Law School. Along the way, he's pursued numerous projects, keeping alive another story of his own people, indicated by two of his many books, Acadia Then and Now, A People's History, and Seeking an Acadian Nation, the 1930 diary of an Evangeline girl. Warren, as chairman of the Acadian Museum of Louisiana, was appointed to the Diocese of Lafayette Historical Commission, which prepared a report for the Vatican on the canonization of the Cajun saint Charlene Richard. His work was recognized by his selection for the Louisiana Justice Hall of Fame and an award for lifetime contribution to the humanities. Warren was president for 16 years of CODAFIL. That's the acronym for the Council for the Development of French in Louisiana. And one achievement of which he is deservedly proud was filing a petition for an apology from Queen Elizabeth for the Acadian deportation resulting in the Royal Proclamation. That's a theme that you'll recognize in the book he's about to share with us. Please join me in welcoming Warren Perrin.
Merci beaucoup, Robert. Greatly appreciate those kind words. I'm proud to have many of my former weightlifting teammates here and many dear friends who I haven't seen in a long time. Thank you all for coming. And I'll share with you some of the insight that led me to being in front of you and launching this book. Every 10 years since the 1972 Munich Olympic, someone has published a book. And this 50th anniversary, my book is the only one published, so far as I know. So we hope to keep the memory of David Berger alive and hopefully share with you why it's important to keep his memory alive. A very famous Israeli poet once said, "Remembering the past is a form of hope. Forgetting the past is hopeless." And so what this book is not, it's not a biography of David Berger. It's comparing and contrasting three individuals, one of whom is with us tonight, Walter Amahara, a Japanese American, David Berger, a Jewish American, and me, a Cajun American, and how, with the backdrop of Olympic weightlifting, our lives crossed and we drew strengths from each other and allowed us to reach heights that we never would have imagined. However, among the three of us, only one obtained the life dream of competing in the Olympics when all three of us sought that goal. And sadly, 72 hours after David achieved that victory of lifting in the Olympics, he was dead. So I think we're going to have to refresh it. We're going to refresh in our PowerPoint. And
There it is.
I will mention that the poet laureate for the state, I asked him to direct me to a work of literature which explains that idea. Once you achieve and fulfill a life's dream and you die. And he said there's only one poem. It's J.E. Hausman's poem called "To an Athlete Dying Young." And I have it paraphrased here for you to read. It's as though an athlete won the biggest race. You don't know his name and you don't know the race or the place, but he's carried through the town on everyone's shoulders. And the next paragraph, he's being carried to the graveyard. And the point is, by passing through this life, he'll never know defeat. To me, in David's case, he was only 28 years old, but he had such a promising future. His father, a prominent physician, surgeon, Mount Sinai Hospital in Cleveland, is shown at the dinner table with David seated at the middle by his mother, Dot, and younger sister, Barbara Berger. The photograph of him in the Tulane shirt was located in the archives. It had never been published before. And that's David showing one of his first trophies representing Tulane University. The picture of him in the upper right doing the snatches in the Maccabean Games, where he won a gold medal. And after he immigrated to Israel, he did volunteer work. You see him with, these are disabled students and military men that he counseled and used weightlifting to get them through their disabilities. He tried out for the American team in 1968, finishing fourth, but his burning desire to go to the Olympics caused him to sacrifice inimaginable things. He married his high school sweetheart, Paula King. They were together for 11 years. And when he told her, after he had graduated from Tulane and he had completed a dual major in law and an MBA in business, he could not let the dream die. He asked her to accompany him to Tel Aviv, where he was going to sign up for the Israeli army, which was a requirement for him to try out for the Olympic team. Throughout his life, he was a pacifist, but he was sacrificing that to join the Israeli army. And sadly, Paula declined. And she said, no, you're going to go along. And she remained in New York. And they got an amicable divorce. In that divorce, and I don't mean to trivialize this, but they argued over who was going to take custody of their two beloved dogs. And David got custody. Paula finally conceded to him. And David went to his father and mother and said, if y'all take care of my dogs, I'm going to go to the Olympics. And they agreed. And Dr. Berger, the rest of his life, regretted that. Because if he had said no, David would have not left his dogs. And he'd probably still be with us today, celebrating his 79th birthday. The Munich Games has to be contrasted and compared to the Nazi Games of 36, where it was used to showcase Nazism, the Aryan race of superiority. So unfortunately, the government went too far in the opposite direction of showing non-military force, no security. It was going to be the happy Olympics, the Olympics of joy, to show the world. This was the first time since 36 Olympics that they were held in Germany. And they had clearly been warned that there was a lot of terrorist chatter going on, and that would have been a perfect place for an act of terrorism. But up to this point, we don't see terrorism used as we have now known it to be. And in many ways, Munich has set the stage for what we're still going through today, 50 years later. At 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 members of Black September scaled a fence carrying 2 duffel bags with kamikaze machine guns and hand grenades. And they were dressed as athletes. The security was so lax. Paula and Fred, who went to the games to see their brother live. I'm sorry, Barbara and Fred. Barbara could get into the Olympic Village by wearing a jacket and a cap. That's how lax the security was. So it was nothing for these athletes to come in late at night, having beer. They weren't competing. Maybe to jump over the fence at night and go to bed. So it is believed that many of the employees working in the village had taken keys and handed it to the terrorists. They were part of this plot. Black September was a subgroup of the PLO that had been created so that Yasser Arafat could claim plausible deniability. So it wasn't an action of the PLO, but a splinter group. They burst into 2 rooms, and immediately one wrestler was killed as he resisted, but that allowed 5 people to escape, jumping out of a window. A little later, as they were being led away to a different room, a second coach, Weinberg, jumped him again. He managed to stab one of the perpetrators, allowing one of the wrestlers to escape. And there's a whole part of the book about how that took place and how that wrestler claimed that David was a big part of him being allowed to escape. The world literally stopped. 1 billion people watched the television and listened on radio as this played out in front of the world. Jim McKay was literally on the air for 14 hours. And the world was so hopeful that they could be rescued. Golda Meir had the only government that had trained forces in Mossad in anti-terrorism. And she offered to send that special task force to help rescue him, but the German government refused. They said it was against their constitution to allow a foreign military operation to come in to their country. The government had absolutely nobody trained for this. It was the discussions and the plan for the so-called liberation was carried out by the head of the municipal police of the town, of the city of Munich. Obviously, they weren't prepared, didn't have the equipment, and didn't know how to deal with it. They tried negotiations, and they realized what they wanted was the release of 236 Arab terrorists held mostly in Israel, some in Germany. And Golda Meir absolutely refused, and she said, "We do not negotiate with terrorists. We expect you to get our athletes and coaches safely out of this situation." They finally hatched a trick where they were going to pretend to allow them to leave and get on a plane and fly to Cairo, where once the plane landed, the prisoners were going to be released and they were going to be paid money and they were going to release the prisoners. It was a big lie. They carried it out not with marksmen, but mostly handguns. They didn't have radio communication, and the whole attempted rescue was a disaster. They allowed everybody to get on 2 helicopters, and they were flown to the air base. And as soon as they got out of the helicopters, they started firing. The Germans turned on lights and they started firing. And they killed one of their own. They killed 3 other terrorists, but the other terrorists threw hand grenades and blew up the helicopters, killing the remaining 9 terrorists. There were a total of 11, 2 killed immediately, and then the 9 killed at the airport. The 3 that survived, the terrorists that survived, were captured, and they were imprisoned in Germany. Jim McKay famously came on and had been given some improper information. He had announced to the world they're all free. The Bergers heard that, but they didn't get a call from David. And Dr. Berger said, "I knew it wasn't true, because David would have called me the minute he was freed," and they never heard from him again. An hour later, Jim McKay came back on the air and famously said, "My grandfather told me our greatest desires and our worst fears are seldom realized. Tonight, our worst fears have been realized. They're all dead." So he had lifted on September 2nd. He didn't win a medal, but he fulfilled the Olympic spirit. The Olympic motto is not the winning or the losing, but it's the competition that brings people together. It's when most nations set down their arms to compete in sport and brotherhood. So he lived out his dream, and 72 hours later, he's dead. He's in this coffin. A cargo crew of military Air Force pilots volunteered to fly his body back. You can see on YouTube the plane landing, the streets in Cleveland and Shaker Heights, leading to Shaker Heights, which is a suburb of Cleveland, were lined with people. And you see the picture of President Nixon, because Nixon called Dr. Berger on September the 6th, the day after. And he rather roughly expressed sympathies and told Dr. Berger, "Nothing we can do. We don't know what to do with these terrorists. They're so unpredictable. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know." And kind of hung up kind of abruptly. My editor located tapes of that conversation preceding and after the call. We found it in the Watergate tapes. And we have a Haldeman talking to William Safire, and they're deciding whether Nixon should make the call or William Safire, who is Jewish, the speechwriter, should make the call. Nixon said, "No, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." After he hung up, We later learned he made disparaging remarks about the Jewish people. He was upset with the Department of Labor Statistics led by a Jewish person and thought they were trying to wreck his presidency. And he said, we've got to rid Jews from our administration, or at least keep a Jew in charge of the department so they don't go out of hand. So we know this in many hours of tapes subsequent to this, when the later tapes were released, which accounts for Nixon's gruffness. I have that Life magazine sitting on the counter here. It's never a good thing to make cover of Life magazine because you were killed, but there's a nice story in there about the Berger family, since David was the only American as part of this Israeli team. The next part of the book, in comparing Walter Amahara, the Asian, and me, the Cajun, and I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but I was born in the front room of that house. This was my little gym that my brother and I built. That's me when I was 15, weighing 112 pounds, doing a terrific press, by the way. And at the same time I started working out at 10, David was working out. Same thing with Walter. We all started by 10 or 12. We were all encouraged by Strength and Health magazine and followed. It was a burgeoning sport. It wasn't a well accepted sport. So we had to learn from each other. We self-coached each other. And through my childhood, I became, although I was in the heart of South, sensitive to African American because of this guy, William Darby, who I worked with many summers on my grandpa's farm. And he is the one who made me understand what it's like to be a Black man in Jim Crow South, and made me very sensitive to those issues later on in life. That's my older brother, Terry, who got me into the sport and was a member of the national team in 1963. Our team won 8 national collegiate weightlifting championships in 13 years. We didn't lose a meet in 5 years. So when we showed up, everybody else was fighting for second place. So it taught us the desire to succeed through this unique sport of weightlifting. We have pictures here of David on the upper right lifting for the New Orleans Athletic Club. Although he was attending Tulane, the biggest and baddest guys in weightlifting were in York, Pennsylvania. That's where all of the guys went to train for the Olympics. But the NOAC had some of the best lifters, and they were trying to dethrone this York team. And so Bob Samuels, his picture's on the table, recruited people like Walter, who had left college and was asked to join the NOAC, New Orleans Athletic Club. They recruited David, and they at one time nearly defeated York, I think finishing second in the seniors competition. So that's why you see David in the NOAC. But the NOAC afforded him the opportunity to travel to an incredible meet in Mexico City, where they competed against a Mexican team. And here you see the NOAC beautiful old gym. By the way, NOAC is the second oldest athletic club in the nation, beside the New York Athletic Club. So again, that Strength and Health magazine, we awaited for that every other month to find out what was happening, the new techniques, what to eat, how to lift, how to improve. And we didn't have coaches. We coached ourselves. We were like a band of brothers. This is a picture of the Norwegian lifter who won the gold medal in the class that David competed in the Munich Olympics. Now I'm going to touch on Walter Amahara, who is here. Walter, raise your hand. Walter has been always my mentor. He's 10 years older, but our lives parallel. We've both been married to our sweethearts for over 50 years, and we followed our hearts, but we never made it to the Olympics. Walter developed one of the largest nurseries in the state in Baton Rouge. He's been awarded every honor in the field of horticulture and nursery, but his life story is compelling. And when I learned his story at 4 years old, after Pearl Harbor, being impressed on a train with his pregnant mother, 8 brothers and sisters, never to see California again. They were brought to an internment camp in Arkansas, which is why Walter is in Louisiana now. His mother said, "We're not going back to California. We hear the people in Louisiana are nicer." And his 5 brothers, even though going through internment, all volunteered to join the U.S. Army. So you see Walter proudly in his Army uniform, and he was sent to prepare in the Cold War, Brittlesbrook, Furstenbruck airfield right next to Munich, which is where David was killed. Walter often flew out of that airbase. And his compelling story of being one of the 125,000 Japanese American internees has always impressed me. And America was big enough in 1988 to sign an apology. This is Walter winning the first national collegiate championships ever at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. He won the Pan American Games. And here is a letter signed by President Bush to Walter, apologizing for his internment. When I learned that this had happened, that inspired me to address my family's deportation from Nova Scotia in 1755, leading me to a quest of suing the Queen of England, who had ordered the deportation under the British Crown. And after a fight of 15 years, Queen Elizabeth II signed the Royal Proclamation on December 9th. Just like America was big enough to recognize a wrong, the Queen did the same thing. And by the way, we thanked her before she died, and we got a letter of acknowledgement from her. And there you see the Royal Proclamation. The other thing that it forced me to attack terrorism, partially inspired by David Berger. This 19-year-old Marine, Lex Trohan, was murdered in Beirut along with 253 other U.S. Marines in 1983, when terrorists funded and ordered by the Iranian government killed Lex Trohan, the only son of Shirley and Blackie Trohan from Lafayette. And there was no way to sue until 9/11 and Congress passed a Foreign Government Immunities Act, allowing us Americans to sue in a Washington court against a foreign government involved in terrorism. And I filed the suit in 2016 and ultimately got a judgment against the Iranian government for $50 million. To remember David's legacy would take the next hour. I'll just hit a couple of highlights. This is probably my favorite. This is a sculpture taking the 5 Olympic rings that are broken, but they're pointing to heaven as a ray of hope. This was commissioned and it's in its home state. And to the right, you see the recently erected sign, thanks to some of you who are in the room here tonight, Judge Winsberg and others. In 2002, Avenger Field in New Orleans was renamed David Berger Field. And the sign was ultimately damaged by a hurricane. And the city of New Orleans had passed this resolution. And December of last year, this new sign is now proudly remembering David Berger at Avenger Field. Avenger Field, if you're not sure, it's on Tchoupitoulas, right near Audubon Park. Tulane University planted an oak tree shortly after his death, but then they wanted to build a building and they cut the tree down. So they planted another tree, as you see on the left, and it's a beautiful garden with a fountain, and it's a remembrance of David on Tulane campus. There's a beautiful mural at Shaker Heights High School, which you see there on the wall, and several other incredible monuments. So we're going to conclude. I wanted to launch this book on the anniversary, but then when I learned that there was going to be a lot of heated action going on in Germany for the 50th anniversary, I held back. And I'm glad I did, because for the first time on September 5th, the German government apologized for the planning the botched rescue, and the cover-up of all the records. And the government has announced an 8-man commission composed of German and Israeli historians who will study this incident in the hopes that the full truth would come out and this type of thing. These two women, you see David's picture in the background, were the leaders. Ms. Sprinker on the left and her daughter were there at the ceremony. You see the president of Germany kneeling and expressing sorrow on the spot where David and the other 8 were killed. So I hope that this book will do something to make us understand how we must never give up to terrorism. And I'll conclude by saying, right after Munich, the United Nations tried to pass rules of going after terrorists. They could never do it because nobody could provide an acceptable definition of what is a terrorist. The British viewed George Washington as one. America viewed Nelson Mandela as one. So the smaller governments of the world kept that from happening until 2016. They finally came up. They don't use the word terrorist anymore. It's called violent extremism. And that was because of Gaddafi in Libya, blowing up airplanes. And that's why they went after Gaddafi. So now what you hear about is the world should unite and go against violent extremists. And we can do it by lawsuits, not just by military. And what the United Nations is doing right now, they passed a resolution in 2017 to use sports to try to combat young extremists from being sucked into these militant organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIL. Because sports is where you can get their attention and get them competing and support them economically, macro, yes, but on a minor area, sports can help keep young men and women from becoming extremists. And the country of Qatar has pledged millions of dollars. They do seminars all over the world promoting this idea and giving financing for security at different meets. And I'll conclude by saying Nelson Mandela was elected in South Africa. And a year after his election, the World Rugby Championship was held. And the Blacks were excluded from rugby. And they viewed that sport as elitist. But Mandela said to his Black supporters, come to the match, let's unite the nation. And they did. Go on Netflix and look at the movie Invictus. And if that doesn't move you, nothing will. Sports can be a very healing part of mankind. So thank you very much. I'll be very happy to answer any questions anybody has. I know Walter would like to say something. My dear friend, Walter.
Yeah, thank you, Warren.
Just look in the camera right there. Look in the camera.
I'm Walter Imahara. I'm an American, Japanese American. He tells me I'm an Asian American. I have been telling that to all my people that have been asking for over 80 years. But I'd like to go back to a short story about the Imahara family. I'd like to go back to December 7th, 1941. We were living in California on a farm, 4 years old. And a 60-acre farm my father started from scratch in a farm outside Sacramento called Florin. And from that date of December 7th, that's when it all began. Because overnight, all the community had to report to a concentration camp, relocation camp, some people call it, but assembly center. But we had to go to Fresno. It's only about 3 hours train ride from there. From there, maybe about 5,000 Japanese families were put into, we stayed in a horse stable. And you got to remember where my parents came from was a two-story farmhouse. Okay, so we stayed there a few years, several months, and they shipped everybody to Jerome, Arkansas. Okay, at this point, it's about 122,000 Japanese Americans. Okay, and my father pointed out that, we're Americans and things like that. It didn't seem to matter because you got a face of a Japanese American. Okay, from there we went to Roar, and we spent a total of 3.5 years. Okay. Then we had to go to leave the camp, and my parents got $25 per person, attendant family, including my parents, $250. And my parents did not want to go back to California. They said, if we got off the train there, we have nothing there, no one to help us anything. So they were, my father was very bitter at that point. So he said, we're gonna go to New Orleans. And my mother is a person in a family that pushed the children, 8 children, okay? And every meal we had had to do with education. He knows it, but when it was finished, after life went on, all the 8 children got educated in college in Louisiana. Most of them left, but I stayed behind because I like Louisiana. Okay? And then I went to now it's while we're in New Orleans, there was a Jewish family. They knew my father's plight. He had no place to stay, so he had a barn. We stayed at the barn, and then later on, he built us a little smaller place. Okay, and the last person born in the family was my brother Philip, and he was named after Philip Crow. Okay, so that was right there. A Jewish person could understand all this. We're still like this. I had to go to grade school, 3rd, 4th grade, and in those days we got beat up every day. Okay, because we didn't go for education, we were there like survival. Okay, but the kids, they got it from the parents. It's passed down. Okay, and I got a good story here because at one point, every day I'm beaten on by the young kids. But one day I was on a swing, and I said, and this boy came up to me, told me to get off, bigger than me. I said, I'm gonna take one chance in my life. I hit him with all I had. He went down. I could see the face, his fear in his face. My friends around it afterwards said, you better leave him alone. If you don't, he's gonna attack one day. He's not gonna say anything. So my life turned better. Okay. Then we moved to St. Francisville, okay, antebellum home. Okay, then we moved to Baton Rouge. Now my father has 2 in college, and we're living in a shack. Okay, so he's gonna start James Garden Service. Okay, I mean, like you got no chance, But my father was he stayed with it. And what was a turning point? This now puts it around 1955 or so. Okay, I'm in high school. I'm ready to go to college. Okay, my father was starting to get in business. But what nationality stepped up? Jewish family. This is the first time I'm talking about this, okay? And the Jewish family says, wait a minute, if we have a gardener, let's use Mr. Ibarra. It wasn't James. And my father used to go there. Then the word spread among the Jewish people. Then it went higher because they had all the nice homes. Okay, isn't that a good story? And then, then I went to Southwestern in Lafayette, got my college degree. Okay, and first thing, of the 4 boys, and of the oldest, my parents says, "You need what service are you going into?" It's like we have to go to service. So I was the first. I said, I joined the Army with a horticulture degree, college education. I might get a chance to go OCS. Okay, I go to OCS, and that was the war's been over 15 years. I'm a Japanese American, my size, about 6 foot Caucasian, about 60 of them. And I said, this is going to be tough. Okay, but unbeknownst that these people did not know I've been a weightlifter, So when I found out they have all these uh, records that they keep for athletic events, okay? And I said, oh, I know something, they've been there a long time. Oh, that's easy to break. Okay, that's a turning point. I said, I'll tell you what, I kept it myself. But when I see those guys I can do 50 push-ups like nothing, and they were just struggling. So I started with push-up, chins and all that. I broke it slowly, one at a time. By the time I got out, I had all my name up there. I was an asset. Okay, I was an asset. I got out my second lieutenant. Now, what did they do? The Berlin crisis. They shipped me to Germany. A secret clearance, because I was trained for military purpose. Okay, and I didn't know where we're going. The whole class went. I got the order. I said, and the officer gave it to me, Dachau. And I looked on it, and this part I will get emotional. Okay. Okay, I spent this is 61. Okay, now the U.S. Army has been on Camp Dachau for 15 years. We took over all the barracks, the officer quarters, and everything else. And one day somebody told me, let's take a tour, because we were ready to go to war. We didn't have much time. I took a tour, and I mean, I've seen some stuff. So in my life, I've seen the atrocity. So
He couldn't finish the tour.
yeah, couldn't finish the tour.
of
Okay.
Dachau.
And so I made it back to Louisiana after got in the nursery business and started weightlifting again. Okay, so my life, when you talk about the Jewish family that helped us in the beginning at Baton Rouge, my parents. But anyway, all my achievements, and I'm not even talking about weightlifting because I was part of it. Association work and all that. A lot of people helped me, you see. But it's a good story, huh? Yeah.
But what he forgot to tell y'all is, while he was in Germany, he met the love of his life, Suna, who was there teaching. And they fell in love and have been married. How many, 60 years now? 60. And Walter was on the team that went to Mexico City, along with Mike Williams, who's also a local here in New Orleans, and competed together. So they had an incredible trip together. Any questions from anybody about anything? We have a few minutes.
I have a quick question. You had said that there was, the German government was apologizing. Were they just inept, or do we think they were complicit in the situation?
Oh, that's still up for debate.
So the full truth hasn't come out.
Exactly. Truth be known, the West German government didn't do anything. They deferred to the local municipal police. Now, the 3 terrorists who were captured and imprisoned 2 months after Munich, terrorists hijacked a Lufthansa jet. And they demanded that those 3 terrorists be released. And the German government quickly released them. And I've read many accounts that believe that the Germans put up that whole fake situation because they didn't want to keep those PLO terrorists in prison because they were going to have more acts of terrorism against the German people. So they set up a fake just to let them out and leave the country. So a lot of people do believe that there was still a lot of resentment and lack of caution and protection, not only for the Israeli team, but all the athletes in general. It was a deliberate attempt not to have a lot of security. And they tried new ways of controlling people and clearly didn't work. And plus, the games had been on for 10 days when this happened. And so after 10 days, they probably felt some comfort that we're going to be all right. We're going to get through this. And then it happened. It's the only time in Olympic history that the games were suspended. And they were suspended for 36 hours. And there was one ceremony in the stadium where the chairman of the IOC said the games must go on. We can't let terrorists stop the games. But the Israeli Golda Meir recalled all of the athletes and they all returned. Now, probably the most fascinating thing is what Golda Meir did after that. And you can get, I have the film Munich. There's several books have been written. She created a committee called Committee X. She had her top Mossad people resign from the government and go into total hiding. So there would be no connection with Mossad or the Israeli government. And they committed all the money they needed to kill everybody that had anything to do with carrying out, planning it, or financing it. And then they went further and started going after leaders of the PLO. And that lasted 20 years. And tragically, a crew of 5. What they did, they had a head committee, and then each committee, subcommittees, all secrecy. Nobody knew anybody else. They never used their names. Everything was in code. They had secret groups set up all over the world, carrying out these assassinations. 5 were in Norway, and they thought they had captured the leader, and they misidentified, and they killed an innocent Arab. They murdered him. They shot him in front of his pregnant wife. And they tried to leave the country. They realized they had made a mistake, and they were secretly trying to leave, but they were all captured, and they were tried and convicted. 4 of them were convicted of murder and manslaughter. So it's not a pretty picture, but it shows how they call it Sidon, I think, was the secret name, which means spear, I think, in Sidon, no, not sure. In other words, that was the secret name of the whole operation. But Steven Spielberg won an Academy Award for that portrayal. And David Berger is one of those featured in there. David was so dedicated, he had to sign an agreement to take anabolic steroids administered by the team physician once a month. And I interviewed the girl that drove him to get the injections, Sharon Smith. She lives in South Carolina now. She was married to Bill Ginsburg, David's lifelong best friend. And Ginsburg's father was Dr. Ed Ginsburg, who was head of the Jewish fund that raises money for Jewish causes. So that the Ginsburgs were very close to Golda Meir, and they often come, she came to their house. And so David was a part of that was going on. But Sharon told me, I interviewed her twice, that David hated taking the injections. He knew enough, his daddy was a doctor, he was smart enough to know it wasn't good for him, but he did it anyway. And that doctor who injected him, the team doctor, was in Munich and identified David's body, and later came home and told Sharon what he found. I won't go into those details, but he was able to determine that David had tried so hard to get, he was shackled, and he just totally tore the skin off trying to get unshackled when the shooting, because the shooting went on for 2 hours. I mean, it was like a fiasco. And but they threw the cause of death was suffocation because of the grenade, smoke inhalation. John, you don't have any questions? We have John Barry here, the famous author here, weightlifter.
I didn't really know him. I was at meets with him in the Northeast, but he's certainly I'm good, and that happens. Roughly the same age, certainly registered. I'm glad you in the book. I hadn't realized it's Tulane connection until your book.
Yeah, his wife, his ex-wife, would not grant interviews, but at one time, there was a play being written, A Form of Hope, by a playwright from David's hometown, Cleveland. And she interviewed David's ex-wife and in preparation for this play. So we got a lot of personal information, which we enclosed in the book from that interview, which she was able to share with us. And there's a wonderful Berger exhibit. The family gave many of his nicest souvenirs, like his uniform, his hat, his medal. He didn't medal, but you got a medal for competing. And it's in the Olympic Museum in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm going to do a talk to them by Zoom next month. It's just, he was put on a postage stamp in the Philippines. There's a street named after him in Israel. Several major scholarships in his memory. Tulane gives a scholarship every year. It's listed on a beautiful plaque in the auditorium on campus for the outstanding athlete in club sports. But it's just a wonderful legacy that he's left. His dad used to love to say, David was the smartest guy in the gym and the strongest guy in the classroom. He was a National Merit Scholar. He was brilliant. Everybody said, totally brilliant. I mean, to get 3 degrees like he did in such a short period of time is amazing. Any other questions?
I'm confident we'll continue schmoozing here at the museum. I'm gonna pop back onto the camera, see if I can see myself. I can. To say thank you so much to Warren for this wonderful presentation and for Walter for sharing your story with all of us today. For everybody in person, you can buy a copy of Warren's new wonderful book here in our museum store. And for our friends online, we have an online store as well. And so we invite you to purchase the book online. Please keep up with the things that are happening at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience. The best way to do that is to join our newsletter. And you can do that either at the front here today or for our folks online, msje.org/connect. And I'm so thankful for all of you being here.